say 8:30 this morning, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this morning for Graduation Power Hour. We are focusing on student success plans this morning. My name is Lisa Height, and I am a consultant with the state support team. I primarily work with Career Tech Education, but I get to partner with Aaron quite a bit, and this is one of the things that we partner on. So joining me today, Aaron is in the office next door, but on your screen you can see him. Aaron, if you want to say hello.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all again. Thank you for being here. Really excited about presentation today. Lisa will be taking the lead, so I'll be kind of lurking in the background. If you have comments to drop in the chat, go ahead and drop those in, and then you will see my face pop up on screen occasionally to help address some of that and links and things like that. So thank you for being here.
So I do have a lot of information in this session. However, if at any time you have questions, please just pop it in the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask, I will not take offense to that. We want to make sure that we get your questions answered today in regards to student success plans. So I want to start out by talking about a friend of mine. So this is my buddy Shad. He's a friend of mine from junior high and high school. But Shad was a little bit of a wild man in high school. He had a lot of fun. I don't know why any parent would do this, but his parents bought him a red shiny motorcycle when we were in high school, and he had a lot of fun with that motorcycle, a little too much fun. Some late night running from the cops, just having a good time. Definitely an adrenaline junkie is how I like to refer to him. Not that everything was good, clean fun, because I do know he smashed a few mailboxes in his day. He's like one of the kids I refer to as a kid who is a good kid, good heart, just made some bad choices. And so Shad was a year ahead of me in high school. And you can imagine my surprise when I walked into my senior government class that first day of school, my senior year, and there sitting in the class is my buddy Shad. He didn't graduate. He had failed government kind of at the last minute, although we all know there's last minute usually about failures. And so he ended up not graduating, and his options were to take summer school, which he did not do, or come back in the fall just for the government class. And so he did. And that lasted about 2 days. So I had reached out to Shad when Aaron and I started doing these presentations, and I asked permission for me to share his story, because I think there are kids like Shad who slipped through our cracks in the past. I mean, this probably was, if I'm dating myself, about 30 years ago. However, I know that these situations still exist today, where we get that surprise kid senior year who all of a sudden fails a required class and does not graduate. But I'm going to ask you today to think about, was it really a surprise? All right, so we go back to Shad. He didn't graduate. He didn't stay in senior government. I asked him, hey, you only lasted about 2 days in that course with us, and then you were gone. Did you get your GED? And he's like, no. And he said, I never graduated. So here's this guy who is now in his 50s, and he does not have a high school diploma, nor does he have a GED, because he was just too embarrassed. But this is where Shad is today. He actually has done very well for himself. He owns his own business. It's a tree trimming business. You can see that adrenaline junkie. He's getting his fix, because he's the one at the top of that boom ladder there with a chainsaw in his hand, dropping limbs to the ground. Definitely a dangerous occupation, but one that he loves. And it's been keeping him out of trouble, because he gets that adrenaline high from his career. And he does a very good job. He's got several workers, several of these trucks here. He's done very well for himself. In fact, he's been married for almost I don't know, 28 years. He's got 3 kids here in the background. The oldest one, this one right here is his oldest. He's actually going to school to be a doctor. He's working on his PhD right now. The old middle one works for him, and his youngest is now a freshman in college. So he's done okay. But I would like to think, is that the reality, right? Because if you think about this, most of our kids don't end up with the kind of life that Shad ended up with as a non-graduate. In fact, 82% of our prisoners in our prisons are actually high school dropouts. They're kids who never got a diploma. So if you look at that visual, that's pretty scary, right? Like, this is more of the reality than what happened to Shad. And I can't help but think, while Shad turned out okay, what if someone had intervened earlier? What if someone had paid attention to the kind of fun that he was having? I mean, he liked to take risks. It was obvious. He's running from cops at midnight on his motorcycle. What if he'd been shown some fearless careers? What if he'd been able to job shadow one of those careers for a day? What if he'd been encouraged to participate in some work-based learning experiences in those, what I'm going to call crazy careers? So if you could just in the chat, what are some of those fearless careers? What are some careers we could have recommended for Shad? Just drop your ideas in the chat.
We've got firefighter. Police officer. That was actually what I was thinking, Susan. High adrenaline kid. Any other ideas? You can unmute or drop in the chat.
Yeah, so those are some good suggestions, right? And I know police officers are always happy to have a ride along from a high school student. I know in the past we've had people put in thank you. Military is what I was just going to say. People suggest military. And recently I've gotten to know some electrical linemen, and that's a pretty dangerous and scary job, and they make some pretty good money. That might have been a career that we could have shown to Shad and given him some job shadowing, or at least, you know, conversations with those kind of people in those careers, so they could tell him the fun that they have on the job. It depends on your definition of fun, but for the people who choose these careers, they love it, right? And that's what we're supposed to do, is choose a career that we love. I do believe that these experiences would have saved him graduation, right? And that's kind of what our goal is these days. You know, Ohio's one plan is 1 year after graduation being the first step to increase the number of our students who are enrolled, enlisted, employed, or engaged in a self-sustaining vocation. So, you know I'm not the only one who knows a Shad. In fact, I can think of at least one other story of someone who was very much like Shad and who ended up not graduating. So how about you? Is there someone who was the Shad of your school, or do you currently know in your school system someone like Shad, a kid who, you know, is a good kid, a funny kid, but squirrely, just always kind of getting into a little bit of trouble, and you're scared maybe for them that they might not make it to high school graduation? Anybody wants to put in the chat, you don't have to give first and last names, but it's just always kind of getting a temperature of the room. Do these kids still exist? Do you know a kid like this? You can put a first name, you can put a yes. We got a Greg, right? We know someone who's like this. I know here in my office, I have someone who's an aunt of a child like this, who's always coming over trying to pick my brain for career ideas that might interest her nephew, who's very much like Shad. Yeah, so these kids still exist, and they still are needing someone to intervene for them. And that's the why of a student success plan. It's someone to actually pay attention to this child who is at risk for graduation, have a conversation with them, and come up with a plan to help them achieve graduation. So this actually is required by law. Student success plans actually were a component of the career advising policy. And so this is actually from 2015, 2016 that we were to begin implementing these. And I know that the reality is not everybody has done that yet, but I'm really going to encourage you, if your school has not yet started this work, start it today. Talk to somebody when you leave this meeting and say, hey, we really need to get our success plans going, right? Because they are required by law. They have been required by law, but more important than that, they're going to make a difference in the lives of our students. So in order to have a student success plan, you need to first have your at-risk criteria. What makes them at risk for graduation? I do want to show you quickly the actual career advising policy because it did get revised this summer. And so if you were not aware of that, it got revised July 21st of 2022. However, in this policy, it still says, beginning with the 2015-2016 school year, we provide additional interventions and career advising for students who are identified as at risk of dropping out of school, right? And then we also have to write those student success plans for our students. A couple of other things I wanted to point out, and I may need to grab my copy because there were some things that kind of got a little bit of a revision in this that I think connect to that. So if we look here at 3, right, we're providing those additional interventions, right, in accordance with section C. So then if we go down to, I have it color coded here, so I just got to connect it up. Right, so we're including information regarding career fields that require an industry recognized credential, a certificate, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a graduate degree, and a professional degree. We want to make sure as we're having these conversations with students, as we sit down for their graduation plans and their success plans, that we're covering that whole spectrum, right? And the other part of that is to provide students information about ways they may offset the cost of post-secondary education. This is all new, right? So not that this part is required for a success plan, but it might help a kid, you know, who really is a smart kid and they're just not putting forth their effort. This information right here might be because they think it's unattainable for them. There's no way they're ever going to get to college. Well, that's not true. There are lots of ways that you can offset the cost of education. And so maybe no one, especially if they're a first generation college student, has ever had that conversation. And so for an at-risk kid who is capable and just is not doing the work they should be doing, this gives them maybe that spark, right? You light that pilot to get them back on track and have a goal, which we'll see when looking at some of the student success plans. making us a SMART goal is a component of many of them. And then finally, I wanted to show you this last section here. Should be number 4. It is not. Give me a second. 3. Right here. So we're creating, if a student is identified as risk of dropping out of school, the district shall develop a student success plan that addresses the student's academic pathway to successful graduation and the role of career tech education, competency-based education, and experiential learning as appropriate in that pathway, right? So prior to developing the student success plan for a student, the district shall invite the student's parent, guardian, or custodian to assist in developing the plan. And then following the development of the student success plan, the district shall provide career advising to the student that is aligned with the plan. The district's plan to provide career technical or career advising created under B2 of this section. So there's a lot to this, but really it gets down to, are they at risk for graduation? What's causing them to be at risk? What are some things we could put in place? What are some things they could put in place to help them get back on track? So that's the career advising policy link that's there for you in this presentation. If you want to take a look at the entire thing, if you've not yet done that. And I do want to show you that, ODE does have a model student success plan, and they say these are the required components. Now, this is from the career advising policy law. The required components are that we have contact information, career pathway goals, their academic pathway plan, an assessment record, their career ready skills, career exploration activities, and a planning checklist. And I think, is all of that as the required parts, is that really going to get a student back on track for graduation? Not most of the kids that I've known who were at risk for graduation. And that's why in 2020, an additional law came along, and that is our graduation plan and at-risk policy. So a lot of times when Erin and I were giving these presentations in years past, people would say, well, where's the career advising policy police? Who's checking on this stuff? I don't know that there is any career advising policy police, but someone was paying attention and seeing that, since 2015, we've had this law about student success plans, and yet we still don't have the graduation rates where we need them to be. So they created a second law that says you need to put in board policy exactly what your at-risk criteria is, and they reinforce the use of student success plans to address that at-risk population. What they added, this used to be optional. In the 2015-2016 law, it was optional that you provide these things. And now the way that the law reads with the 2020 law, it says that the district must assist at-risk students with additional instructional or support services to help the students qualify for a high school diploma. It's not, you might want to offer these, you must assist a student with some of these additional instructional support services. It's not an option anymore. You have to provide some of these because it says it may include any of the following, but you need to have some of them available. So mentoring programs, tutoring programs, looking at your offering high school credit through flex credit, adjusting curriculum options, making sure that you're offering career tech education, providing mental health services. Maybe you even need to have in your building physical health care services, and then family engagement and support activities. I have noticed in the last couple of years that we are seeing mental health counselors being employed by our districts. That was kind of a rarity in the past, but it's becoming a more common practice. I'm also seeing schools employ social workers that typically in the past they didn't exist. And that is to help with this, right? So just remember, as you're thinking about writing or creating these student success plans, that you need to, as a school, provide some of these options. And you might want to look at your data as to who's at risk and what's making them be at risk to decide which of these options you need to make sure that your school is offering. Just saw a couple of things in chat, but it looks like it's all from Aaron. All right.
Just backing up what you're saying, boss.
Thank you so much, sir. You know, and I really liked this image, right? Because by assisting our at-risk student with these additional instructional and support services, it's all about the support, right? It's this framework that we're putting in place, solid structure to help a kid achieve graduation. And we all know if they achieve graduation, they're more likely to move on to employment, enlistment in the military, college, but they've got to get graduation first. And there's a lot, you know, that we know that goes into all of this. Aaron and I given these graduation power hours. So we sat down with a communication specialist maybe about a year and a half ago, and we tried to make it more visual for you to help you understand how all of this connects. So the career advising policy covered all of these components. It talks about career connections, career advising, career pathways, the different pathways to a diploma, credit flexibility, interventions, that would be your success plans, and your post-secondary transition. But then along came this graduation planning law. And you can see it also talks about career connections and career advising here, and then the student success plans, right? And so these student success plans are connected to both of these laws. And the whole reason for all of this is to get to graduation. And graduation 2023 is our CCR, credits, competency, and readiness, right? And so we want to make sure that as we're looking at our career advising policy, that we have our student success plans in that. As we're looking at our graduation plan law, we realize student success plans were added into that as well. And there's a reason for that, because we're trying to increase our graduation rates and therefore impact that post-program success. So what does a graduation plan look like? I'm going to be honest, it's really hard to find them out there. So if you have Googled it trying to find them yourself, you probably have not found very many high school graduation plans that are out there online as a template. Fremont, which is an Ohio school, they actually do. So they took the original model one that ODE has out there, and they've added their logo to it. It looks pretty nice. They've got their mascot, they've got their logo, but it just goes through all those required components that we talked about earlier. But here we go, right? What is your career goal? What interests and skills and knowledge support your career goals? So we're having conversation with kids about, hey, where do you want to be in life? And how are we going to help you get there? And then you're looking at all the courses they would need to take. That's all part of that required components. Once they're on a success plan, it has to be looked at every single year. And so you are, checking in every year that, yes, we checked in on this. So this one, as I said, takes off of the model plan. If you are looking to do the same, I just really encourage you to go back to what I showed you on what is now required that used to be recommended, and where are those components that you need to make sure that you're providing, like the mentoring, the tutoring, the credit flex, the mental health counseling, being sure that that is included in your student success plan. But you certainly can take this model and add things to it. However, I think that there are some other ones out there that you might want to look at and grab some of the pieces from them as well. So the next three I'm going to show you are actually from universities, but I thought that they really had some good components. So it's a student agreement, right? I agree to use the strategies I have mapped out in my academic success plan. So we're just getting kids to say, hey, we're going to do this stuff, but we want to make sure that you understand we're doing this for you. We're going to do our part. We need you to agree to do your part. And it has them reflect on what motivates them. And after they graduate, what do they plan to do? What are their challenges? What are things they can do to be more successful, to eliminate that challenge? And where can they get help from that challenge? So, you have to tweak this a little to fit the high school experience. It talks about their study habits. And I like this. Who's your support network? Right? Who are people who can help you? And maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it's a coach. Maybe it's a family member. Who's your support person? How can they support you? So really, it's that little bit of counseling about, look, you're not alone in this. There are people who care. There are people who want to help you. So let's think about those people and let's use those people. And then thinking about the past. What helped you to be successful in school? What are some strategies that you used to be successful there? And then what's currently contributing to your low grades? And what might help you change that? Right? So this is just an example of one you can look at. I really think the more examples you look at, you can pick out those pieces that you feel best fit your school. Here's another one. Again, we've got an agreement. Very, very similar. And then the Texas A&M. Who are you? What motivates you? What's your graduation goal? You're right. You're looking at that SMART goal. Here we go, right? It's spelling out what's a SMART goal. And let's create that SMART goal together. Let's look at your possible challenges. Let's make a plan of steps to overcome those challenges. Let's think about resources that will support you in achieving that SMART goal. Right, and then we're evaluating, how much time you spend on other things, who your supports are, right? So these are examples. You can take pieces from them. I do have a couple of other old ones. If you're really interested and you want to see some, I can scan them and email them to you. They're no longer online. But I will say, if you really would like to see additional examples, shoot me an email and I will get those to you. But go ahead.
So we do have a question in the chat as well, Lisa. It says, Stephanie's asking, I struggle to figure out how to work with these students on their success plans because the plans are so involved and I have to pull kids who are failing, usually most classes from those classes on the credit recovery time. Try to fill out these plans. Any ideas on how to complete these without disrupting classes?
I do have some ideas, and I'll give you a little heads up. Our next session that we're doing is called an implementation session, and that is October 25th. I know of a couple of schools, and remember, ODE gives you permission to do this. You're transforming your typical school day, who have, you know, they're basically having PD days for their students. And so we're going to take a look at how Butler Tech down by Cincinnati is doing that. Now that is a career tech center, but you can absolutely implement that same kind of day and run sessions. So no one is going to their core academics that day. Everybody's in some kind of session. And that session could be a student success plan session. I also have a whole bunch of resources from this guy. I cannot tell you what school he's at. I do know his name is Davis Baker. He's been in education for 40 years, and he's doing a great job just running a seminar day for his at-risk students. He takes them off-site. He makes it a big deal. He brings in motivational speakers, sets them up with mentors. Like, there are ways to make this happen. And so our next session on October 25th will cover more of that implementation in detail.
And that's 2:30 to 4, correct?
Yeah. Does that help you out a little to begin brainstorming of ways that you could do that?
And one thing to tack onto that, what Lisa was just saying too, is Stephanie, I appreciate your comment too, and what Lisa's getting at, and what we're going to talk about when we talk about those implementation strategies too, is that we do need to look at systemic approaches here, right? This cannot just all fall on one person operating within the confines of a system that, as you said, may pull them out of classes that they need. So it's really important that we take this information that we're presenting and we feed this up the chain. We talk to our leadership teams and say, okay, we have to do this. How can the system support it? Which is not an easy conversation to have. And sometimes more people need to come to the table, but keep that in mind too, that we need to let leadership know about this and try to work together systemically to support the students.
And some things to think about, to have those conversations. Who's going to write that initial student success plan? Who's going to be the one to follow up on progress, and how often? And why would teachers need to know who's on a student success plan? How does information help them? How will it be provided to them? If you decide to use mentors, where are you going to find the mentors? What community partnerships already exist? And how could you build them into your student success plan supports? And if you have not started this work yet, who's your movement maker in your district to get this work started? For me, if you have not started this yet, this is that main question. If it's not you, and that's okay, you probably know who is the person in your district to go to get this work going. Where and how to start. It's not just that students have the right to an intervention. The law says they're required to have an intervention. And then anticipate awareness of this requirement by all stakeholders. So the reason we have that there, that was a nice way of saying, this is the law, and stakeholders being students and parents as well. I want you to think about, if you don't have this in place and a student does not graduate, what are the consequences of not following a law and a student slipping through the cracks? Okay. We've all seen what happens when people aren't following the IEP laws. That same kind of thing can absolutely happen with not having a student success plan in place and a student not graduating. So again, just some resources for you. If you want to start thinking about implementing, if you're just starting, we just wanted you to think about all the people who should know about student success plans, who's on them. So this is just a resource for you. And then I wanted to give you a couple of other resources I came across just recently, just trying to do some more research. And I found this flow chart that I liked, right? So So you form a student success plan team, right? And the team attends training. So you would want to then bring them in, have them look at sample student success plans, identify which ones they like and what kind of resources you already have or what kind of resources you want to provide. And then you want to align those resources into your student success plans, right? So this is just a really good flow chart to help you step through getting those student success plans in place. And don't forget this piece here, that communication between students, families, the Board of Education, and your staff on the policies and procedures and practices in regards to student success plans. And then this is an implementation toolkit from Harvard. I really liked this as well. It just kind of goes through, you know, what are the guiding principles of a success plan? They should be personalized, student-centered, equitable, actionable, relationship-driven, right? They're information-driven, they're secure. We're giving them to the teachers who need them, but we're not putting them out there for everybody. And they're sustainable, right? Their implementation, those action steps for students, the SMART goal, it's sustainable for the student, right? So just a really good resource for you to use to help you make sure that you're creating student success plans that are not just about compliance, but are about impact. So I thought you might enjoy looking at this resource and deciding if it would be a good fit for your school or not. But if you have student success plans written, right, if you've already started that process, but you may need some further development, we have this tool for you to kind of think through those same questions. And then I wanted to share this with you because when I think about student success plans, I think about this book. And if you have not read Upstream, I highly recommend it. It's probably a quick read with a lot of impact, especially for those of us in education. And it's based on this parable. So you and a friend are having a picnic by the side of the river. And suddenly you hear a shout in the direction of the water. A child is drowning. Without thinking, you both dive in, you grab the child, and you swim to shore. Before you can recover, you hear another child cry for help. You and your friend, you jump back in the river to rescue her as well. And then another struggling child drifts into sight, and another, and another. And the two of you can barely keep up. And suddenly, you see your friend wading out of the water. Looks like he's leaving you alone. Where are you going? You demand. And your friend answers, I'm going upstream to tackle this guy who keeps throwing all these kids in the water. Well, are we the ones tossing our students into the water? Are we giving them a life preserver or are we pulling that life preserver away? So I failed Algebra 1 and now I'm in Algebra 1 and geometry at the same time. We've thrown that kid in the water. I missed 40 days of school, which led me to fail 2 classes. And now I don't have enough credits to go to the Career Center, which could have saved that kid. We've thrown that kid in the water. I had 3 out-of-school suspensions this year, which led me to fail courses again this year. We've thrown that kid in the water, right? Maybe partly on their fault, but partly on our fault too. I'd like you to think about that parable and throwing our kids in the water. And we wait till senior year to be concerned about their graduation. I know I'm being very blunt when I say that if and when you do that, you absolutely have thrown your kid in the water, right? We can start interventions in 6th grade. We can start credit recovery in 9th grade. we can look at what this child is likely going to need to be his graduation pathway in 9th grade and start working toward that instead of waiting until senior year. We want to avoid the senior year surprise. This year, I get it. Maybe some of you thought graduation 2023 really wasn't going to happen. I know there are lots of schools, because Aaron and I are getting calls weekly. How can I help these kids get graduated? Okay. So start figuring that out, but start figuring it out for your 9th graders too, because we can't every year be trying to figure out graduation. We should have those student success plans in place. We should know what the kid needs as they are progressing. That's why we have graduation plans. Right? And so I'm encouraging you to go upstream. Use your graduation plans to identify the needs of who needs a student success plan. Look at your college, right? Not your college, your credits, your competency, and your readiness. Who's going to need what? 9th grade, start paying attention. Who is going to need what? Who is at risk for graduation? Every time you sit down with them, because you have to yearly, you're using that graduation plan to determine who's at risk for graduation. And real quick, I want to go over that competency piece. So this takes you to ODE's website, and we've got this competency. The original competency that you're trying to achieve is your end of course for Algebra 1 and English Language Arts 2. That 684 is the current score. Well, we know who our strong testers are based on prior test experience, right? So yes, everybody has to take these, and this is the first goal. But if we're being proactive and we're going upstream, we're going to say, you know, this one probably isn't the path they're going to choose. So we need to look at the alternatives. The career experience and technical skill is probably going to be that next alternative. And this is when I think about, I had a conversation with a school, seniors, right? That senior surprise. Well, how am I going to get this kid 250 hours of work-based learning this year? Yeah, you may not. That's why you should be looking 9th grade through 12th grade. This is not, I worry about graduation senior year, right? 250 hours can begin being tracked in 9th grade. Industry recognized credentials. Are you offering them in your school? It is not just a career tech option. There are industry recognized credentials that can align to the things that you already have going on in your schools. If you're offering digital art and design, there are industry recognized credentials that go along with that. And so I'm going to take you, if I can find the list easily. Here, this is the way I like to do it. Industry recognized credentials by career field. Arts and communications. If you've got art programs, which I'm sure most of you do, we can look at, right? Print ed may be an option. Adobe may be an option. Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, all of those may be options for you. You do not necessarily have to be directly in career tech education for that. Okay. The other ones I want to point out are these Six Sigma yellow belt. So these are like problem solving leadership ones. People are having success with these. Lead for change. If you've got an FFA program, if you've got an FCCLA program, these are ones that easily can fit into that. So we want to be thinking about how can we build in those competencies so that we're not struggling senior year. And then in part of going upstream, do you need to revisit your at-risk criteria? Now that we have hit graduation 2023, right? Maybe your at-risk criteria should include these things as well. You know, that's up to you. That's up to your school system to decide. But if a student does not have credits, you probably already have that. That's probably already your at-risk criteria. But what about competency? Do we need to think about getting a student on a success plan if they do not pass as a sophomore that English 2 test? If they do not pass the algebra, do we need to think about they need a success plan? I don't know. If they're not doing anything freshman, sophomore year to get them toward their readiness seal, do we need to say, hey, this kid, somebody needs to pay a little more attention. We need to make sure we're meeting with him to keep him on track, right? So these are things I'm just asking you to consider, to have a conversation. Do we need to add these to our at-risk criteria? Check your data. What does your data say? And then I also wanted to share, you know, just thinking about if you're looking at your data and you're seeing, oh, well, most of our kids are failing because they're missing assignments. Well, then you want to do something in tier 1, something for all kids to encourage or to support not having missing assignments. And I know that may seem kind of off the wall, but I wanted to share with you this book, Power of ICU, because this book is about building a system that does not allow for missing assignments, right? And so there's been a lot of, if you follow them on Twitter or you follow them on Facebook, the numbers are amazing. We're getting 3 to 4 times fewer students with Fs than in the past because they've implemented this Power of ICU system, right? So we've got this comment. Whoops. Let me go back. I'm going to move all of your pretty faces so I can read it. Right. So from ICU school in Beardstown, Monday, the football team had 14 missing assignments. The next day, after checking ICU software, the football team had 1 missing assignment. Great job, coach. Right. So it takes a village sometimes to keep a kid on track, but that can be for all students. And if you start doing interventions for all students in tier 1, then you will need fewer success plans. If you've got attendance issues, if that's a problem at your school, what are some things you can implement for all students so that it doesn't get to a point where those absences are impacting their success in their classes? So things you do in tier 1 will prevent needing to have student success plans. Right? Our job is to try to catch them before they're drowning, right? Because sometimes if we wait until they're drowning, it's too late. And I like to think of it in terms of in loco parentis, right? In place of the parents. What are things we would do for our own child if our child were struggling? And then we should provide, or we should demand, that those same supports are in place for the students in your schools. Because again, it's not that these students have a right to the intervention. The law is requiring that we are providing these interventions. I think about my own daughter with this one. So she, as a sophomore or freshman, was really struggling with geometry. Just, I mean, and for her, because she's an A student, she doesn't like to get B's or C's. So it depends on your definition of struggling. But for her, she felt she was really struggling. And she had a breakdown in school one day. She cried all day long. And I was like, no, we have to do something about this. So we got her a tutor, and that helped her because we could get a tutor. But what about a parent who doesn't have the financial ability to pay for a tutor? Right? So what can your system do to provide tutoring within your school day? What can your system do to support a student who can get extra help at home? And there are lots of ways to do that now that we have technology. Record lessons, post them. It's that tier 1 supports that you can provide to anyone who wants to use them, or you can require for kids who need to be using them to avoid the student success plans. We want to keep our kids on track. And something to think about as well, if we would increase our graduation rates, and I know most of you who are on this call, most of you already have a 90% graduation rate. As a state, we do not. I believe, and Aaron, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're roughly at an 83% graduation rate for our state. If we would increase that to 90% as a nation, we'd have 250,000 more graduates, which would be $3.1 billion more in earnings, which would generate $664 million in taxes, which would give us $16.1 billion in healthcare cost savings, would give us $5.7 billion in economic growth, and 14,260 new jobs just by increasing that graduation rate. So yes, it helps the kid, but it also helps us as a population, as a community, as a society as well. All right, I went through that pretty fast. I gave a lot to you. What questions do you have for us? You can put them in the chat or you can unmute.
The one thing I'd like to reiterate too real quick, and I know Lisa touched on this a little bit, is that the student success plan policies, the requirements have been around since 2015, 2016. If you're thinking to yourself, it's been around for a while and we're not actively working on this now, or maybe this is the first you've heard of it, we just want to tell you directly and honestly, you are not alone in that situation. That being said, to also piggyback on what we talked about in the presentation and Lisa talked about, they just updated the laws on this as well. And we can tell you that people are actively looking to make sure schools are doing this work. So, I kind of made a comment in the chat about how it's been about 10 years since the law, almost 10 years since the law passed. People are starting to actively pay attention now. Do not let this work just strictly fall on your soldiers' shoulders, but be a soldier, your shoulders, and regardless of the nature of your position. This is something that you do need to talk to your leadership teams about and look at systemically how you're going to implement this work, okay? It's very crucial. I think Stephanie made a very good point about, what do I do in the existing structure? I have to pull them out of academics. That may be the thing you have to do right now, this moment, but we do want to start looking at how can we start to implement this in our systems so that we're not penalizing the students who need the most support by taking them out of core classes that they need to graduate. We don't want to step over $1 to pick up a dime, so just keep that in mind as well. I want to reassure all of you that if this is new to you, or maybe you're surprised to hear that they're paying a lot more attention to this now, that is the case. You're not alone, but now that we know better, we do need to make sure we do better on this work, because people are watching and starting to take action accordingly.
Absolutely. And I know we all go into education because we care about kids, right? Getting them a diploma for those the kid who's struggling, the kid who's at risk for earning a diploma. That's probably the greatest gift you can give a student who's struggling, is to help them achieve that diploma, right? And you know, I do, I guess, want to put out here too, the at-risk criteria, you want that to be research-based. You know, not every student who's on an IEP is at risk for graduation. That's why we have IEPs too, is to make sure that they're getting supports they need. It's really, what are the things in your school that are keeping kids from graduating? Look at your data. Look at your CCR. Who's meeting that right now? And whoever is not, that might be, you start to investigate, why aren't they? And that becomes your at-risk data. Just because they're poor does not necessarily mean they're at risk for graduation. Just because they're from a single home does not mean they're at risk for graduation. What are those things that really are preventing students from achieving graduation? The things that you as a school system can control. That's where your at-risk criteria comes from. Not from blanketed, but from the factual data. Any other questions?
Nancy put a comment in the chat. Is there a good straightforward resource to present to leadership to grab their attention, that there are updates that would need them to take a second? I know what I would recommend. And Lisa, you can jump in here as well, but I would show them those links to the Ohio Revised Code. You know, I mean, that's probably one of the first places I would go say, look, they've just updated this. This is real. This is happening.
I would read through that yourself, maybe, and highlight some of those things that surprise you that are in it, because some of those updates surprised me that they put in there, and I would probably take that and say, hey, did you know this? Because it's new, right?
Yeah, that's where I was kind of like, I was, you know, there's so much information, and you get like maybe a 5-minute window to say, hey, I'm not sure if you've seen this or not. You know, you may want to go back and take a look at this. So thank you for that link. I had some technical difficulties getting on first, so I wasn't sure if I had it. So
yes, and if you got the link to, and Aaron, if you want to drop that in again, just to these Google Slides, there are several things linked for you, right? Lots of live links already there for you, so that you have access to that. You have access to the resources. You've got access to look again at those example student success plans. If you don't have student success plans in place and you're not sharing those with your staff members, that's where you have to start. We have to get this work going.
And to your point, Nancy, you know, sometimes when you do get that 5-minute meeting to sit down, you know, it's important to Lisa's point that we just don't take the law and throw it at them, but, you know, taking a few minutes to read it over yourself. Luckily, both of these links for the Ohio Revised Code are fairly short and succinct. And I really like Lisa's strategy about just highlight a few things, say, hey, look at this, look at this. Because I'll tell you, when we first started presenting on this stuff back in 2015, we thought we were busy in 2015. You know, I say that kind of tongue in cheek about the fact that how many changes we've seen now in education the last couple of years between COVID shutdowns and the new graduation requirements. But the fact of the matter is, now that this has been codified in law and they've even updated it, and I can tell you, and I'm not saying this to make anybody a boogeyman or anything like that, there are organizations actively looking to determine whether or not students who are at risk are receiving the support that the law says they're supposed to get. In the event that schools are not providing the proper support to students at risk of not graduating, best case scenario, open the checkbook. You know, I mean, seriously. And that that's the best case scenario, you know. So I know no one wants to be in the newspaper for, hey, here's a school district who we take a lot of pride in serving our students doing well.
Right.
But look, our at-risk students are not receiving the support that they're supposed to receive by law.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the compliance. Obviously, we do this because we care about the kids. We want them to have a very good education. But we do need to look at systemically, do we have these things in place? Because again, people are looking, friends. And there are organizations, there are advocacy groups, there are parents, there are networks who are actively looking to see if schools have this. And the ripple effect could get as far as, are we providing FAPE? Are we providing a free and appropriate public education? Which then takes a compliance issue to a civil rights issue. That's when the U.S. Department of Justice gets involved. That is actively happening in Ohio right now. And again, I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm just saying that we do need to make sure we take this information to leadership. They have you at this meeting. They're allowing you to be at this meeting for a reason. Take this information back to them and share this with them so that we can make sure that we're serving the students appropriately and with equity and legally.
I think another good piece maybe for you to take to them to kind of get their attention. What does your data look like for students? How many students do you have that have not passed proficient at the English language arts and algebra requirement for competency? And how many of those students are not currently then taking the coursework to get an IRC?
So quick question, and maybe this, you said this in the beginning and I just missed it. On that, so if we have students that are, have multiple disabilities that are not, and they're taking alternate assessment, but they're also not maybe, and we have to move, we're working on competency at the same time, and they're doing a transition plan, or they're doing, because right now we're kind of working through a couple of those students too, like how are we going to get them through this? Do they need a student success plan as well on top of their graduation plan and on top of their transition plan?
So there are some students who will need all three, right? So all students get the graduation plan.
Right.
Some students will get a success plan, and a few students will have all three. They'll have graduation plans, success plans, and the transition plan in their IEP.
So how do you, going back through, like, it basically is that criteria set forth by your district? Do they have to determine who gets to the student success plan? Is that correct?
Yeah, whatever at-risk criteria has been board approved by your district, that was part of that 2020 law. That's what you use to determine who is placed on a student success plan. And if that happens to be a student who also is on an IEP and has their transition plan, they still need a student success plan.
And those documents will mirror each other, but this is for all of you in the room. Keep in mind, a student being on an IEP doesn't mean they're at risk for not graduating.
Right.
The at risk for not graduating would be the criteria that your board set forth, which has to be data driven. For example, they're not passing a class, they have chronic absences, discipline referral, things like that to determine that they're at risk to not graduate. And then in that case, their IEP, their transition plan, their IEP, graduation plan, their student success plan, we're all going to cover in a little bit more detail different components of that same idea. How are you moving towards graduation? What support are you getting? What support are we providing you? What are your expectations? What do you need support in? And really those documents will all kind of mirror each other and just focus on different aspects of it, of moving the student forward.
Okay, thank you. That gives me a good, I didn't just want to walk into my superintendent's office and be like, hey.
Right.
So,
surprise.
Yeah, surprise. Guess what? Because I think I sat through the training for the student success plan probably 10 years ago and was like, oh my gosh. And then you talk to people and they're like, it just,
Yep.
And I think at the time, everybody kind of knew districts were not really overly taking this seriously, or putting a little blurb in their, operating procedures, or whatever, but that was about it. And so I wasn't quite sure how to kind of approach. So
but I think if you have that data that shows how many kids right now, and I had senior surprise, but if you take your senior data, like, look, these are the number of kids who don't have enough credits. These are a number of kids who have not passed their competency measure yet. We
Well,
need student success plans for these kids.
Well, one thing though, if anybody is doing this, that might work in anybody's favor. I don't know if it would help, because this is kind of what I'm thinking. We have, and I was this person, or there were two of us that did this position last year as well as this position, but we did through the all the ESCs in the state had a grant for, through Ohio State, to do an opportunity to access a grant through Ohio State to do a family and community engagement grant. And so they for different youth. A lot of it was students that had fallen through the cracks with COVID. And it was kind of a big, we had to go through and do a big project and try and figure out who was at risk. And we determined, so in our county, we went for justice involved youth, but we started an at-risk youth council. And for 2 years, they funded a family and community engagement person. So after those 2 years, we've been trying to figure out how to fund it after that, like how to get the districts on board and how to get them. So actually, this might play into that part, because as we were sitting here talking, I was like, I need to talk to, Randy's our person that we have hired to do that full time. I need to tell him this information, because this could really go the route down that at-risk youth council that they formed, and they could really, because they work with but it would be it could be a perfect play into some of that. So instead of maybe asking all if you have that person in your county, that might be a perfect person to kind of discuss that with. If you've got, because sometimes I know for a fact that some of them are like trying to find things to do because nobody will define really what they need to do. They're given kind of such a free reign of, here you go. And I think sometimes that that grant money, how it all goes, you have a grant position and people either don't take it seriously or they don't know how to define what to do with you. And then they have to get, so if you don't carve that niche, find out that you're invaluable, then they're gonna be like, oh, grant's up, see you later, and so I think that might be a great play in for some people, if to find a way to kind of keep that person busy, find them invaluable, and a great piece of work for them to do.
Absolutely. The only thing I want to add into that, though, while anyone can write the student success plans, anybody can be the person who is checking up on, right, who's progress monitoring their success once they're on a student success plan. This new revision of the career advising policy, it did spell out that the guidance counselor had to be involved. Now, it doesn't say to what degree of involvement, but previously it never called out that role. It was only with this summer's revision that they added that component in. So just make sure that if you go that route, which I think is a great idea, that you also somehow in that flow chart of how it will work, you add in the guidance counselor somewhere.
Right. Now being referred to more commonly as the school counselor.
School counselor.
Right. Yeah. Nancy, also our other Nancy, we have two Nancys, made a point too, which actually I think leads into our kind of our last slide here. She says the implementation piece becomes overwhelming, especially when considering confidentiality. Group work with at-risk students versus individual meetings. Yikes, we are struggling. We don't have enough personnel to make this meaningful. You want to show that last slide? Then we have one other question here as well. We'll get to in a second, but go ahead, Lisa.
So I would encourage you, if you have not started this work and you're trying to figure out how to implement it without going crazy, come to the 25th, right? This implementation. Butler Tech is going to present for about 20-25 minutes, and then time for questions. What they're doing, it's called the 5th Day Experience. They do it every Friday, all second semester, basically. You don't have to do that. You could do for a year. And you can make their schedule the way that they're running it. I think you could make it work to add in sessions for graduation planning, for some career advising activities, for student success plan, and it can't, you're right, maybe it can't be one person who's running these student success plan sessions. Maybe you have to develop this team and they each will take a group of 5 to 10 kids and work them through creating their student success plans. So that is October 25th. That's our implementation. I'm just going to throw out some ideas on ways that you could get this work started. And then on November 8th, it's our next graduation power hour, and that topic will be business partners and community partners that we will be talking with.
And
So I
our
hope
last,
you can join us.
sorry. And our last question, Lisa, I'm trying to find out what we've been talking here. Can you cite where it talks about the school counselors being involved? I was trying to find it in the law here. I know I have it. It's
Give me-
highlighted on
You know
one
what,
of
I'm
them,
gonna
but I
get
don't
up
have
from
my-
my desk because I did highlight it in a different one, so give me a second.
Yeah, we will. I'm trying to look here for you as well, because I know some of you have been asking about that. Troy, I saw your question as well. But it does specifically mention in one of the Ohio Revised Codes here that they did specifically name school counselors, and they may have used the outdated term, I've learned, guidance counselor, but the school counselors are listed in here. I remember when Lisa and I saw it, we were like, whoa, that's new. But if you look at those two hybridized codes we gave you, it's in there, and I'm trying to read them
So it
fast.
is C1. So let me, Aaron,
On
can you
which
put
one?
that in the
On three-
link and I'll pull it back up.
On 3313 or
It's the 3313.6020. It's the one that just got updated July 21st of 2022.
I'm gonna put the link in here for you. And where's the registration for the October 25th session?
All right, so let's pull this up first. So it is
Maybe
C1.
call guidance. Yep, C1. You want to embiggen that a little bit, Lisa?
Sure.
And here is the exact text. I've also dropped in the chat. It's wordy, but it is there for you as well.
Yes.
Because beginning in the
So-
2015-2016 school year, each district shall identify students who are at risk of dropping out of school using a method that is both research-based and locally based, and is developed with input from the district's classroom teachers and guidance counselors. The students identified at risk of dropping out of school, the district shall develop a student success plan that addresses the student's academic pathway to a successful graduation and the role of career tech education, competency-based education, and experiential learning is appropriate in that path.
So that part is new because
Yeah.
in past versions of this law, it did not call this out. But again, it's saying, the student success plan is developed with input. So they're not saying that they have to be the one who sits down with the student to write the student success plan. Maybe it's your school counselor who trains a team on the way to work with a student to fill out their student success plan.
But be aware they're starting to hone in on this a little bit. So those are conversations that need to take place. And here is the link for the advanced implementation strategies. We're doing, I think, 3 or 4 of the advanced implementation strategies all year.
We are doing 4. So we'll have one October 25th, and that's looking at graduation plans and student success plans on ways that you can begin implementing those. On January 10th, we're bringing in Apprentice Ohio and OOD. On February 28th, we're looking at purpose-driven education systems. And then our last session on May 9th, we'll be talking about Envision It.
I did put that link in the chat there for you as well. So remember, the advanced implementation strategies are only 2:30 to 4, mainly because we're bringing in outside speakers and things like that. And we found those are the times we can usually get them in. So.
And if I could just put a plug in, really make sure that you're looking at those industry recognized credentials and seeing which ones you can offer in your own school. I know that there's some misconception out there that the student has to go to career techs to get those, and that's not true. And if you do work with a career tech center and they tell you that the student cannot earn or probably will have difficulty earning the industry recognized credentials in their career pathway field, the student, for graduation purposes, does not have to earn the industry recognized credentials that are aligned to their program at the career tech, right? So if I'm in, let's say I'm in landscaping or floriculture, and I'm going to have difficulty, it's probably not feasible that I will earn those industry credentials in that pathway. I could earn the Rise Up credentials. There are 2 of them that equal 12 points, and I would still achieve my competency for graduation. Does not help that quality program review out for that career tech, but it does get the student graduation. So for graduation purposes, using industry recognized credentials, they have to be in the same pathway, but not necessarily the same pathway that they are enrolled in career tech education. So that's some misinformation that I know is out there that I want to make sure you have the right information if you need to have conversations with others.
Can you repeat that again and how we go about with suggesting that if that was an option? And is Career Tech still responsible for administering that credential?
I don't know that they're responsible.
Okay.
Ohio is a shared system.
Okay.
But the bottom line is everyone's goal takes a village. Education is everyone's business, right? So, and I do know there are some career techs who have started a separate elective course that they are just doing the Rise Up curriculum in that elective course for that purpose, right? So if a student needs to use the career focused pathway, that's not what they're calling it anymore, but that second option for their competency, and they are in career tech education, yes, the first choice would be that they earn the credentials that go in the program that they are enrolled in. But if that looks like it may be too challenging for that student, that's okay. There are other industry recognized credentials that may be more aligned to their ability. So the Rise Up credentials, Telephone Doctor, the Lean Six Sigma, those industry credentials for graduation purposes can count for a student, even if those credentials have not been approved for the pathway for which the student is enrolled in career tech. But you too can offer those same credentials.
Okay.
And so when we look at the implementation, I think using Butler Tech's, I don't know, strategy or whatever, their Friday experiences, you could run the curriculum using those Fridays if you chose to do that for yourself.
Nancy's mentioning too that they have to pay their vocational school per student if they want to utilize Rise Up.
Well, that's if you want to use it through them. You could use it through yourself as well. I mean, you know what I mean? Like there are ways to make that happen. You don't necessarily have to go through them, but there are costs to this. And also just remember the state reimburses any school for the ones that are obtained. Right? So if your student does earn it, they'll reimburse you for the cost of that credential. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of Rise Up to know about cost issues, but I do have coming to my Career Tech Coffee Hour, Ohio Virtual has done a lot of good work with the Rise Up curriculum, and they are presenting actually the morning of October 25th on the Rise Up credentials. And that's something that I can ask is how does that cost work? Because I don't know if it's like you buy the curriculum and that covers the cost of credentialing, or if you buy the curriculum and you have to pay to take the test. I don't have the answers to that.
Yeah. That's just next week, by the way, too, already, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
So, and the big thing too here, I hope the big takeaway from a lot of what we talked about today is that discussions can start taking place, right? None of this is stuff that we expect. You've got this information today and tomorrow everything's going to change. Things may need to change. Things may need to evolve. We may need to restructure what we're doing a little bit, right? But that's going to take discussions. And the purpose of being here today and why we appreciate you being here today is so that you can now go forth and have these discussions, how to restructure, how to reorganize. The ways that we're delivering education are fundamentally shifting. They told us this with Ohio's One Plan 2014, I think, when it started. And we're there. We're restructuring the school experience. And for those of us that have been around for a while and our peers that have been around for a while, it's scary because we're seeing one of the biggest shifts in how we now deliver education and how we deliver diplomas even. But this is the time to start take a step back. We have to kind of breathe and realize things are changing. And now we have to change our systems in order to make sure these delivery methods are appropriate. So
Well,
we
and
appreciate
with,
the conversation.
yeah, and with Aaron saying that, I just want to remind you that ODE is giving you permission to transform that high school experience, to transform the way you run your school day or your school week. We do not have to do 9-period day every day of the week. There are schools in Ohio that are doing it differently, and you can too.
You don't have to do 5 days a week.
Right.
I know, breathe. There are schools right now that are not doing, like Lisa said, structured 5 day a week, 7, 8, 9 periods a day anymore. And that's okay. So again, we just want to continue these conversations through this series and the other stuff we're doing. If you got any questions, email, always the best way to get hold. Because we're not always here in the office or always immediately available to take a call. Someone called right now, wouldn't answer. I'm talking to you guys. But do send us an email. We have our other sessions coming up as well. We appreciate you being here. If you have any other questions or anything like that, we'll be here for a few minutes. But anything else, Lisa, we want to add in formally?
Not that I can think of. I do know it's a lot to take in, but I encourage you, start today, do something to move toward getting your student success plans in place and going for your students.
Yes. But we'll be here for another 8 minutes or so, if you'd like us. Other than that, we appreciate your time very much. Appreciate you being here. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully we'll see you in future sessions. And again, if you have any questions, just send us an email.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
I do have a quick question, if you have a second.
We got 8 minutes.
8 minutes. All right, we'll make it fast. I'll take up 2. We have a student that has moved in from Michigan, and he's a senior, of course, and we can't find, he keeps saying in his IEP that he's had alternate assessment. Alternate assessment is qualified for it, but we can't find any test scores anywhere. And they've been trying to get a hold of things from the district, but they sent him a big thick file with no scores in it. They can't find anything. They're still looking, and they're going back to the drawing board that way. Is there, I know we talked at the last session about, there was some.
You cut off for a second there, Nancy. There are some.
Oh no, she froze.
Nancy, if you're talking, we unfortunately cannot hear you. Your little box isn't even lighting up.
I'm going to try in chat. I wonder if she needs to rejoin.
Oh, she's still here. All right, yeah, she bounced out. She saw that, so she's going to bounce out one.
Okay. So just trying to think through her question, it sounds like if she has no record of alternate assessment, she should just go through that process again here in Ohio.
Yeah. We're still recording too, though. Yeah, yeah, you need to get an Ohio diploma. You need to meet the Ohio requirements. If there's nothing in place that demonstrates that they met any requirements. Oh, there you go. Nancy, you're back. But you are muted.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there, but
Yeah, we're not either, but you're here now again, so.
I did, last session you talked about, there was a place that we could find information about like seniors that moved in from last minute and that we're trying to figure out how to get them competency, and the student has listed that they can do alternate assessment, but we can't find any scores, and they're having trouble getting them from the district in Michigan.
Mhm.
So we did, is there a place you can point me to? I can't remember. We talked about that last time, and there was somebody from Whitmer, and I remember they had a Michigan move in, and that's what caught it was about an algebra 2 question, I think, but
This is the graduation page. Just drop that in the chat for you.
okay.
So you'd be looking at demonstrating competency. I'll give you a little information there.
And Graham Wood is a really good contact at ODE for those kind of specific questions. I know I had a district had a question about American history.
Uh-huh.
And I have his answer. If you determined that you'll be awarding American history credit to this student for the course, because they did take an American history course, then it simply counts as their American history course from that point forward. If you believe it did not cover the same content and therefore will not be awarding credit, then it would not count. So for courses, it's kind of a district decision. But for alternate assessment, I think maybe you would definitely want to reach out and get more specific guidance.
Yeah, because if there's no documentation that they did the alternate assessment, things
Yeah.
like that, you may have to go through the decision-making process to determine if they qualify in Ohio and then go that route.
Okay, when that was a question, we had a meeting yesterday, and that question came up, like, would they
Yeah.
have to go ahead and retest, would they have to go through the rubric again to see if he qualified here as opposed to in Michigan?
Yeah, and I did put the link to the graduation requirements office here
Okay,
in the email, because that may be who ultimately you have to reach out to.
okay,
There is some specific guidance around senior move-ins and things like that. I'm trying to see if I can find this for you here real quickly.
yeah, and I know we had discussed it, and I was like, oh, my boss was very interested in hearing about that, and I was like, I can't find it now.
Yeah, well, they did, and they revised the site a little bit. I'm trying to see if they're.
Yeah, and for those of us here in Northwest Ohio, I mean, we do get a lot of Michigan move-ins
Yeah.
and Indiana move-ins. So it's
Mhm.
probably more of an issue for us than it is for those who live in Columbus.
Right. And I do have one last question. Oh, you had mentioned, it's an easy one. You had mentioned that 52 page, like that binder that we had talked about the last time, or that the print off about all the,
Yes.
did you say just to go ahead and get rid of and just work off the website? Is that what we were talking about? Because
Yeah,
it's
at this
updating.
point, what I would recommend personally is if you want to make that, if you just go to the graduation link and go to the demonstrating seals page.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. If you click each seal, they then give you an option to print out how to earn that seal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I know
Like,
what you're
and
talking
I would utilize that if you
Okay.
want to make a new booklet.
about. Okay.
Because that 52-page booklet is good, but we found there may be some potentially outdated stuff in there.
Okay.
Most
Perfect.
of the seals have a little print guidelines.
Yeah.
The only one that doesn't, it looks like, is the seal of biliteracy, which just still has the old school earning the requirements.
Okay. No.
And that's just a one-pager from January 2018, it looks like.
Okay.
But I think that's kind of where we landed, Lisa. Am I correct, or am I speaking?
Yes, yeah. Even though I love that booklet, the website is the most current and up to date.
Okay. I will, my boss and I were discussing that too. And she was like, but that's my Bible.
I
I'm like,
know, me
"Yeah."
too.
Right, it was good. Yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah, right. And the problem, and the thing that's good and bad about that is, it's fine, but if they update things,
Yeah.
our book doesn't automatically update. But
Right.
if you go to any of the seals, there's a print guidelines little button on there that you can at least get the quick printout of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those have been helpful, to be honest with you. So, okay.
Yeah, so
Well,
the
thank-
same thing, and it was in the booklet. He has broken down seal by seal a little bit more with some updates, and the FAQs are on here. So
Okay.
You know, we gotta save a tree. We gotta make the Lorax.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Save the trees.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you so much. I'll stop monopolizing your time. I don't know
Oh.
if anybody else had questions
you're
too,
fine.
but
It's why we're here, Nancy. It's why we're here.
Yep.
Okay,
If you have any
thank you.
questions, choose an email. We'll talk accordingly.
okay, sounds great. Thank you so much. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Stop recording.
Yep. And I think we can shut it down.
All right. Thank you,
All
everybody.
right.
Oh, wait, Nancy got one more question.
All right.
Go ahead, Nancy. But you're muted. So your question. If you're any professional development documentation provided,
Any professional development documentation.
like CUs or
For these
Oh.
sessions, yes. So you
Yep.
will be getting a feedback form from our secretary, and once you fill that out, she'll send you your CEUs for today.
you will have evidence you were here and that you worked very hard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything else? We good?
All right, that's it.
See you on the other side.
Yeah.